crimson sky over Dry Gulch. The sun beat down on Dry Gulch like a blacksmith's hammer, baking the dust to a fine powder that swirled with every gust of wind. Caleb Stonehand Johnson, a man as rugged and unforgiving as the land he inhabited, sat hunched on the porch of his ranch house, his gaze fixed on the horizon. The usually vibrant blue of his eyes was now clouded with a storm of worry and rage. His beloved Sarah, the lily amongst the thorns of his harsh existence, lay inside, recovering from a brutal attack. A week ago, a coyote had slipped into their home under the cover of darkness, leaving Sarah battered and bruised, a fragile bird with a broken wing. Sheriff Thompson, a lawman weathered by years of frontier justice, had investigated. But the trail was colder than a January blizzard. No tracks, no witnesses, just the chilling evidence of violence. Sarah, her mind still shrouded in the fog of trauma, had been unable to provide any details about her attacker. But then, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long, skeletal shadows across the room, she uttered a name, a whisper that sent chills down Caleb's spine: Jesse Hayes. Jesse Hayes. The name hit Caleb like a rattlesnake's strike. Hayes was a drifter, a tumbleweed with eyes as cold and dark as a bottomless well. He'd blown into town months back, working odd jobs, always lurking in the shadows. Caleb had smelled a skunk in him from the start, sensing a darkness beneath his quiet demeanor. Armed with a name and a heart full of vengeance, Caleb saddled his trusty steed, a palomino named Buttercup. He rode through the desolate landscape, the setting sun painting the sky in fiery hues of orange and purple. He found Hayes holed up in a ramshackle saloon in a ghost town, a place where whispers lingered like lost souls. The confrontation was swift and brutal. Hayes, backed into a corner like a trapped cougar, denied the accusations, but his eyes flickered with fear, giving him away like a tell in a poker game. Caleb, fueled by a righteous fury that burned hotter than a desert fire, unleashed a whirlwind of fists and boots, a punishment as harsh as the unforgiving land itself. Leaving Hayes groaning in the dust, Caleb felt a grim satisfaction. He'd settled the score, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, the cowboy way. But as he rode away, the wind carrying the echoes of Hayes's cries, a seed of doubt began to sprout in his gut. Sarah's mind was still fragile, like a spider's web after a storm. Was she sure it was Hayes? Had his thirst for vengeance blinded him, leading him down a wrong trail? The questions gnawed at him like a hungry wolf as he returned to Sarah. He found her by the window, a silhouette against the fading light. He recounted his encounter with Hayes, expecting relief, gratitude. Instead, a look of pure terror washed over her face. "No," she whispered, her voice trembling like a leaf in the wind. "It wasn't him. It was—" Her words were cut short by a sudden crash from the barn. Caleb, his heart pounding like a drum, grabbed his rifle and cautiously moved towards the sound. He threw open the barn doors, his weapon raised. Standing in the dim light, holding a lantern that cast eerie shadows, was Sheriff Thompson. But something was different. His eyes, usually filled with the weariness of a man who'd seen too much, now gleamed with a chilling malice. "Looks like you got yourself in a heap of trouble, Stonehand," the sheriff drawled, his voice dripping with a newfound menace. "Seems I got tired of turning a blind eye to your little operation here. And that pretty wife of yours, well, she knew too much." Caleb's blood ran cold. The lawman, the supposed protector of Dry Gulch, was the coyote who had terrorized his Sarah. He'd used his badge to cover his tracks, to manipulate and deceive. "You?" Caleb sputtered, his voice choked with rage and betrayal. Thompson chuckled, a sound as cold and sharp as a winter wind. "Surprised, Stonehand? Always thought you were the smartest hombre in these parts. Guess you weren't smart enough to see the wolf hiding in sheep's clothing." He raised his own rifle, the lantern light glinting off the barrel. "Any last words?" Caleb, his mind reeling, knew he was trapped. He'd been played, used as a pawn in the sheriff's twisted game. He'd taken revenge on the wrong man, leaving his Sarah at the mercy of a predator disguised as a protector. As the sheriff's finger tightened on the trigger, Caleb closed his eyes, a single, devastating thought echoing in his mind: he had failed Sarah, not once, but twice. The shot rang out, echoing through the stillness of the night. But it wasn't Caleb who fell. A figure emerged from the shadows, a rifle smoking in her hand. Sarah, her eyes blazing with newfound strength, stood over the sheriff's fallen body. "No one hurts my man," she said, her voice steady and resolute. Caleb stared at her, his heart filled with a mixture of awe and relief. The lily had blossomed into a rose with thorns, a protector in her own right. The wind howled through Dry Gulch, carrying with it the echoes of the gunshot, a sound that marked the end of one reign of terror and the beginning of a new era. The ghost of Dry Gulch had been vanquished, not by the strong hand of the law, but by the unwavering love and courage of a woman defending her own. If you are enjoying Adventures in the Old West channel, hit the subscribe button for future posts.